You have been very strong throughout, saying that the West is complacent about vaccinating itself rather than vaccinating the whole world, that the crisis isn't over for everyone until it's over for everyone rather than just the West as well. Where are we in terms of the COVID crisis before we start talking about the next one, if we may, sir? Good morning to you.
Good morning. So that's absolutely right. And the thing about a pandemic, different from an epidemic, is that you have to be paying attention to the whole world. And so it is in our self-interest, in addition to the right thing to do, to make sure that the whole world is covered. So as of today, we at COVAX have delivered over 1.5 billion doses to the 92 lower and lower middle income countries. And coverage in those countries has now gotten up to 46% with 2 doses, which compares to a global average of around 59, 60%. So there's still some inequities. And of course, averages hide that. There are 18 countries that have less than 10% coverage. And it's going to be critical to make sure at least the high-risk populations in those countries are vaccinated, because it's not over yet. We're continuing to see evolution of the virus. Another bad variant can come and sweep the world again, as we've seen.
So in those 18 countries, and then the other 18 who are, whatever it is, up to 20%, and so on and so forth as well, is the crisis as severe as ever? Are mortality rates as severe as ever? Because it's just not getting reported on CNBC. It's not getting reported in the global media. And more shame on us if that's the case.
Well, we're seeing bits of outbreaks. You saw what happened in Hong Kong. You see what's going on right now in China. We've seen another outbreak in South Korea. And I think the challenge also around the world now is people are over with it. They feel they're done with the virus, but the virus is not done with them. And the reason that's important is testing rates have plummeted, particularly in the developing world. So the answer is we don't really know what's happening in these countries.
So my final question before Jeff's got some very pertinent questions as well is why is it happening in China? China has a great testing regime. China has a suite of drugs itself which it believes compete with the Western ones. Why is China, which was the first country in, still going through this crisis? Honestly, why is it going through it?
So what's happened is the virus has changed. So the original virus, Wuhan, when it went to alpha and beta, 50% more transmissible. Beta to delta, 50% more transmissible. Omicron, 50% more transmissible. Now the subvariants, even more transmissible. So the strategy of testing and containing, which is the right strategy in an epidemic, becomes very difficult if you have extraordinarily transmissible viruses. And also, what's happening is previous infections aren't protecting people against current infections. That's why the vaccines are so amazing. They don't protect against transmission, but they protect against severe disease and death. And just to say, compare this to the Spanish flu now. We're over 500 million in infections now. So this is similar to what happened with the Spanish flu, adjusted, but the death rate is much, much lower. Now estimated maybe 15 million deaths overall globally, and that's because we have these really powerful vaccines, and that's why it's so important to get them out to everyone.
We kind of understood the risk from bat viruses, which is why so much work has been done, I think, around that subject. But now we're having to deal with the concept of monkeypox. The cases are starting to rise, but we don't know if that's just more attention being paid to it, and so there's more reporting of it. But it does seem that it's not behaving as it has done in the past, that transmission between humans wasn't something that had been noted before. It's been animal to human. How concerned do we need to be about monkeypox?
Well, first of all, we have to, this is the definition of epidemics, right? Because what you're talking about there is an unusual above background rate. So if this was a small outbreak occurring in Central Africa or West Africa, people would take that as normal. And you do see transmission person to person in those settings. So that's not unusual. But to have it appear now more than 100 cases in 12 different countries with no obvious connection means we have to figure out exactly what's happening here. And the truth is we don't know what that is, and therefore we don't know how severe it's going to be. But it's likely that we're going to see more cases. But what I think is important to your listeners is that we're living in a world with global warming, with increased populations, with desertification, big population movements. This is evolutionarily certain that we are going to see more outbreaks. And that's why pandemic preparedness is so important. Because look at what it can do economically when you have a pandemic hit. I think we have to remember that. And yes, there have been investments, but not at the level that we do for, say, military preparedness or fire preparedness. We need to change that. And that's some of the conversation that's going to go on here this year at Davos.